All right. We'll call this regular meeting of the Inspector General Committee meeting to order and ask the clerk to take roll.
State Attorney Ehrenberg, Commissioner Cruz, Public Defender Howitt, Commissioner Crydell,
Present.
Vice Chair Kugler,
Here.
Chair Romano,
Here.
Commissioner Sharif.
Present.
Thank you.
Any introductory comments from the commission?
None.
Okay. And a motion is in order to approve the Inspector General's Committee meeting minutes from June of 2022
So moved.
by Commissioner Crydell, second by
Second.
Commissioner Sharif. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. Motion carries unanimously. We are now up to the Inspector General's 6-month status report. General, you have the floor. And just for the record, state your name, please.
John Carey, Inspector General for Palm Beach County. And again, good afternoon, Commissioners. And we have a lot of things that we've accomplished over the last 6 months, and we've done a lot of work on the COVID-related things during this time. So I'm looking forward to briefing you on where we've been and where we're going. I always like to start out with our mission, just not just for you, obviously, but for all those out there on Channel 20 who are looking, who may need to know what does the IG do? What do we do for the citizens of Palm Beach County? And again, we provide that independent and objective insight, oversight, and foresight to promote integrity, efficiency, and overall effectiveness in county operations, and ultimately to enhance our public trust.
Let the record show that District Attorney is here. State Attorney is here.
I did too. It's supposed to stop.
Right. That's right. It's 2 o'clock somewhere.
Now, again, you've seen this too, and I like to, when I talk to folks, and I say, let me talk to folks in just people speak, because sometimes that bureaucratic talk doesn't quite get through. And I like to say, well, really, we do 3 things for the citizens of Palm Beach County and for our governments. You know, we do oversight. We hold government accountable for the dollars that we spend, for the trust that's given us. So that's one, and that's what most of the time that people know IG's for, that oversight. But we do much more. We do insight, and that we come along good people, and we help make government better by being more efficient, make recommendations to be more efficient and effective. And then finally, we do foresight, and the fact that we try to prevent bad things. We try to look ahead and prevent things from going wrong, and we teach and train. We provide different measures to try to recommend things, internal controls that will prevent fraud, waste, and abuse in government. But now I've got a new way that I tell folks too. Here's just another way to look at the Inspector General world, what we do. In the center of this chart, there's real or potential risks and problems that can happen in government. And from the retroactive side, it's happened, we will audit then or do inspections or investigations. But we also look at these problems and risks from a proactive or prospective side in monitoring, auditing, inspection, and recommendations, and advising. So all to make government better. And I like to say, too, that this is the spectrum of what we do. And if you look from left to right, it states general to specific, and you can almost say, too, a little more informal to the more formal. On the one side of the spectrum, we monitor, we advise, we teach and train, and then we move on to maybe being a little more specific in quick looks or limited reviews. And then as we go more specific, we do those inspections, reviews, evaluations, or attestations. An attestation is an audit term that is similar to a review. It's not a full audit. And then finally, on the most specific side, we do the audits and investigations. Here's where we're going to go today, kind of in our outline. First, we're going to talk about terminology. And most professional disciplines, or many at least, have their own unique terminology, technical terminologies. Well, the Inspector General field is likewise, we have our own terminology amongst us. So I want to review some of the basic terminology that we go over, particularly related to money. So when you see this during the presentation, it'll make sense. First of all, the term question cost. And I put up there at the bottom right, you see the 1978 IG Act. And even though this term is used in our standard operating procedures, and this is our term that we use here in Palm Beach County in our policies, it comes from the 1978 IG Act. And most IGs, and the terminology that I'll be going over, most IGs from the federal level to the state to the local level will use language like this or very similar to the language that we use when we're talking about money. So question cost, again, originally was in that act, there's really three categories that falls into. It may be a violation of a provision of law, regulation, contract, grant, policy, or procedure, or document governing expenditures. Now, an example of that would be, so that's a violation of a law or a contract. That would be like in one you're going to see today, where a vendor is required by the contract to submit original manufacturing receipts as part of the contract. Well, they weren't submitting those. They were submitting some other documents as the manufacturing receipts. So they weren't complying with the contract, and therefore the cost that we would be associated with that would be a question cost in and of itself. So that's a category that we categorize as question cost. The next category under question cost is a finding that such cost or financial obligation is not supported by adequate documentation. And an example of that would be, let's say we have a city policy that when you travel, most cities have this, most organizations have it, whether it's government or non-government, that they have certain requirements that when you come back, you have to submit your hotel receipt, your taxi receipt, your receipts to get reimbursed. Well, if a city has that as a policy, and yet their folks come back and don't submit receipts, or just tell you, and this happens and has happened, that just says, well, you know, the hotel cost me this, the lunch cost me this, and they'll just tell you what it is, and they accept that, that would be a question cost because there's not adequate documentation according to the standard. And then finally, question cost may be some type of expenditure of funds for intended purposes that are unnecessary or unreasonable. An example that we've had in this, we had one city where we did an audit where their policy, for example, is to, when people travel, that they're to get the standard government, there's a federal government per diem rate for a hotel. For example, Washington, D.C. used to be, I don't know what it is now, but around $200. Okay, you have everybody coming back and giving their receipts for the hotel, but one person comes back and gives the receipt for $500. Well, that's unreasonable. That, you know, with it, when they didn't have a reason, they didn't have a business reason for that. Or, for example, we had a city one time that had a city policy where the city council members received a $750 a month car allowance. It's one of the highest in the state for a car allowance. Well, we found some of those city council members were coming into the city and they would park their car and then get into a city vehicle and drive around all day. Now, some people right off the bat says, isn't that theft? Well, no, it wasn't theft. And they didn't have a policy, because when it came down to it, they did not have a policy that specifically told them, hey, you can't do that. It's like, really, you think it's pretty obvious. I mean, this is the obvious. But what the council member said is, my predecessor did this, I've done this for years, nobody's questioned me, and show me where a policy that this is wrong. Well, there's not a policy that's wrong, but we put that as questionable expense because we thought that expense was unnecessary and unreasonable because you're getting $750 a month to drive your own car. And we recommended the city change their policy and tell their city council gee, you can't be driving a city car if you're getting $750 a month. So that's question costs that you'll see often in our reports. And so, as such, not all question costs are indicative necessarily of fraud or waste. Sometimes they may be, but not necessarily. It's a lot of times, I just say a lot of times our question cost is just not adequate accounting for our taxpayer dollars. That's a lot of what question costs are. And then we have two other categories under potential cost savings. One is identified cost and avoidable cost. And identified cost are those dollars, those identified dollars that could potentially be returned to the government, recouped. For example, you're going to see a number of these investigations that we conducted during this 6 months where applicants improperly applied for and received business or rental CARES Act funds where they weren't eligible to receive those. And so those dollars were identified costs that we told the county that you can recoup those dollars because they were given to them improperly. So that's identified cost. And then avoidable cost is future cost that may be saved by recommendations that we put in place. An example of that would be one city was giving somebody tuition assistance, which is not uncommon. They give tuition assistance to a number of folks. Well, this person, when we did the audit, we found a person had been receiving and had planned to be receiving for a number of years tuition assistance, but they were pursuing a degree that was unrelated to their work, which was in their policy. It had to be related to enhancing your work here. And so, one, we said not only should you recoup the dollars, which would be identified costs you had been providing that, but if you stop paying that person as you had planned to for the next 3 years as they go matriculate their degree, you will save that money. You will not be spending those. That's avoidable cost. So those are the costs that you will see. Now we'll move on to staff accomplishments. Now these are certifications received just during this last 6-month period. These are some of our team that all of our Florida IGs, everybody who's been in an office, pretty much anybody is in one of the Florida local or state IGs, you'll send your team to our National Certification Academy and to receive an IG certificate in their training and testing to make sure they're proficient in their particular IG skill. So this is the team that we have that received the certifications just this 6 month. All of our folks in the office, now let me take that back, most of the folks in the office have at least 2 certifications of some type. Not only the state this Inspector General certification, but certifications like CPE, CFE, Certified Fraud Examiner, CIA Certified Internal Auditors, so most of our folks will have at least 2 certifications
John?
to help their professional, the way they do business. Yes, sir.
Could you go into just a little bit of detail of what it takes to become a certified inspector general, investigator, and auditor?
Yes, thank you. How do you become? Well, first of all, just to be qualified to do that, you have to have had a minimum of 1 year experience in an office of inspector general, or doing these, because they want you to have some experience. That's the minimum just to get and to be in a IG office. So, once you get there, you're submitted by your inspector general. It is a full week, 36-hour course of CPEs, of rigid CPEs that give you the basics of here's what it takes to be a certified in your field, whether it's auditing, investigating, or evaluations. And so it's 36 hours of on-site, and it has to be on-site training that we do. And we have the instructors are certified instructors through NASBA, the National Association of something, that for certification. So that the instructors are all the top, these are top inspector generals from across the country usually who are teaching this. And then at the end of the course, there's a 100-question test that they must pass. And so once they do that, then they become certified. Now, I might add, if you notice on there, again, we had Lizette. Is Lizette here? We had Lizette and Chelsea, nope, not here for investigations. Hank Nagel. I saw Hank is here. Hank came back to us, and I introduced him at our last one, I think, who had been in the office before, had left to go back up north to be an internal auditor for his county, but then came back to us, and now we are so happy to have him. But at the time he was here, he was doing contract oversight and evaluation. So now he's doing audits, and so he's a certified auditor. And then we had Nicole, who I think is here, who is a certified inspector general auditor. If you notice, Tony Montero, he is in charge of our contract oversight and evaluation office or division, and he's been certified before as a certified IG evaluator. But we sent him to the inspector course because you're going to see later on in our presentation, a lot of his work is investigatory by nature. For example, it's not just monitoring and doing evaluations. When we have complaints in general about some contract, we believe somebody says, I believe this contract was let improperly, or I believe that there was something improper about the procurement process. If the complaint is about a process and not a person, Tony will do that investigation because he's the expert on procurement. On the procurement process and contracts, and so he does it's an investigation-like investigatory work, and so we thought it beneficial to send him to the investigator course to hone those skills. So I might add, so these are certifications. The only other noteworthy thing, Colinthia Dillard here, she is now the vice president of the Palm Beach County Forum Club, which is a big deal. Of many things that Colinthia is involved in. So congratulations, Colinthia. So and that's, again, a very high honor to be involved in that and to be vice president. Okay, let's get into our activities. Now I'm going to have a commercial break before I talk specifically about our activities for the last 6 months. I'm going to talk a little wider about COVID, what we've been doing, because it is so pervasive, and this has taken up a lot of our work. This has taken up a lot of the nation's attention and work for IGs across the nation. So let's talk about COVID activities. You know, the county had $750 million of federal and state funds that they're using to help relieve. Just in the news, I just read today that they received an additional $12.5 million in federal funds to help assist people with rental assistance. So there are millions of dollars that have been funneled in quickly to the local jurisdictions and are being trying to serve our citizens in need. But on the other hand, it requires oversight, and that's what we're providing, independent oversight. This is a snapshot from, and again, this is just not the 6 month. This goes all the way back to March 1st of 2020 when we started working on COVID cases, COVID reviews of the type of cases. This is a snapshot of our efforts in trying to provide oversight of the investigations. You can see we've had a couple hundred complaints and correspondences. We've made, you can see the large number of referrals to law enforcement that we have from some of the complaints that we've received. And you might ask, the question might be, how is it that you only have 209 intake matters and yet you have 279 referrals to law enforcement? The answer to that is one person to one law enforcement agency is a referral. So in many times you might have one complaint, but with multiple people involved or multiple subjects. And so every person that's referred to law enforcement, we consider that a referral. So that's how that can be up there. And you can see already, I'd like to show you the green bubble. We're receiving back over $114,000, almost $115,000 that the county has received back as a result of our investigations. Because once we find that somebody has improperly received either a business grant or rental assistance, they're usually very quick to pay that money back to the county, particularly when they see that we're referring it to law enforcement. And so they're pretty quick to pay that back when we note it out and we show them that, no, this is clearly improper, the way you filled this out. And so a lot of money so far that they're paying back as we identify the cases. And I just might add, these numbers, boy, everything is, it comes down to numbers are important and they have to be accurate. And I want to give a shout out to Jeff Whaley over here, our IT guru, an expert. He's also does so much more for the IG office. He is our numbers and specific, and he makes sure that when we have a number on our presentations or a number in our annual reports, that they're right. And I've often heard the president of our IG association, he's known for saying this often. He says, IGs can be controversial, they can be late, they can be not liked. There's a lot of things that can happen IGs can do, but you can't be wrong. And IG has to be right, because that's what the people count on us to be right. And Jeff keeps us right, and I appreciate that, Jeff. Okay, now to the 6 months. Now let's start with our intake and investigations. This is our intake that we've had through our hotline and the hub of Evangeline Rents, who is here. Her leads this effort along with Tecia Morris, that everything, again, that comes into the IG, whether it's a phone call, an email, a letter, it goes through Angie and her crew. So it goes in there first. She takes these complaints and correspondences, does a preliminary review of what do we need to do, and then farms it out to where it needs to be, or handles many things herself. So as you can see, even though we have less complaints that came in this time, we have more action that has come out of her section. The investigation, the referrals within our office. Again, some of these referrals, like Tony will talk about later, of complaints about procurement processes, those go to Tony and then he takes them over and looks at them. And again, the difference between management inquiries and management referrals. A management, this is maybe another terminology I should put up there, but an inquiry is when we send it down to the city or the county and we say, hey, look, we have questions about this. Could you inquire about this and respond back to us? And we have them ask questions, do their own internal investigation somewhat. And if they respond back to us and we're satisfied with either, okay, now we understand it, or they've investigated and they found something wrong, but they've taken appropriate action, we'll write it off. But we may, if we're still not satisfied, we may investigate it. A referral, as opposed to an inquiry, is where we just send it to them for appropriate action, and we don't ask them to follow up with it. Sometimes they do, but we're referring this to you that are usually more minor offenses, allegations of things going wrong, and we'll just refer that to them for appropriate action. Now it comes over into our investigations. And again, you could see much more active than we were the last 6 months. Again, right now, 31 ongoing investigations, and most of these are, again, COVID, CARES Act type related cases, rental assistance and business grant assistance. 200, if you notice, I mean, this is a large increase in the referrals to law enforcement, and those are mainly to law enforcement, and those are COVID-related cases. Those are those CARES Act-related cases, and some of them are pretty extensive. I wish I could talk a lot more about those, but again, those are under law enforcement. We're working with law enforcement right now on some of these cases that they hopefully eventually will come out. We can talk about those.
I just have a quick question. I apologize. Is there any explanation that you guys can see as to why there's a significant increase in CARES Act activity by the IG's office?
Yes, but because again, this has popped up, and one, it's by extensive work with the county. And I want to say the county is just working very well, and they've set themselves up, a number of the county offices that we're working with, to identify red flags. And so any red flag they see, they're referring it to us. And so that's number one. Work with the county is just tremendous. Number two, these investigations you will see are a lot shorter. A lot of times they'll take us, a year or two, or more to do some of our investigation. These CARES Act, for example, on the rental assistance are pretty focused and limited, but there's a lot, unfortunately, there's just a lot of people who have falsified information, particularly on rental assistance. In the big picture, millions of dollars, I mean, it's a small percentage, but nevertheless, you can see 200 referrals. We've got, a lot of people who are falsifying documents to receive this assistance, that anytime the government says, hey, here's a bunch of money and we can give this out and we want to get it out quickly, unfortunately, there's always some folks who will run to try to take that money improperly.
And did the IG's office work with the county to identify what individual categories would be red flags so that
Yes.
the county could be better at identifying those?
Yes, we've been working with the county. In fact, we've met, it's a great relation. Stu Robinson has met with the county folks, and we've had a lot of meetings. We've been, in fact, their off-site, which office was it we went to? Their off-site Community Services. They had an off-site and invited us to come out there, and Stu talked to, about 200, or how many folks were? Or how many? Yeah, quite a bit of folks out there. So we've been able to speak to them on what are the things we're looking for. So it's really been a good team effort in trying to find this. And along the way, they've instituted also internal controls to try to stop as many people as they can. But again, they're trying to balance getting money to people in need, desperate need, and doing the right thing. So it's a tough balance at the county, and we're working well with them. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
So that's an overall picture of our investigations, of kind of some of the things we're doing here. Now let's get into some of the cases. And again, most of these, are these CARES Act type cases. This first one was Eclipse Wellness Center, where we had the actor provided information and disguised that they were already receiving $25,000 in Restart Business grants. So they disguise they're altering documents, they're not telling us what they need to do, and we found that the two owners knowingly altered their identification information to receive some of the money. Again, we identified this money, and again, the county's already recouped it. In these slides where you see where it's green, that's dollars that have already been recouped by the county, or they're in the process of recouping, and the people are voluntarily providing that money back, or sometimes set up a payment plan to repay the county. And that was Chris Dykman. Chris, I know he's here. Chris took that over and finished that report. The next, again, is another Restart Business grant, where we had the person who applied had 3 separate businesses, and they did not disclose that they had received this federal payroll protection program monies, because the way it is, if you identify that, it's going to make less what you would receive from the county. They'll subtract what you've received already and give you that. So they did not disclose that. And so we did find that they did spend money inappropriately for ineligible items, and there was some PPP money that was not disclosed that had an effect. It was a very minor. In fact, the dollar amount that they really should have owed back would be something around $62. The main problem that this person had was that they spent the money inappropriately for things that wasn't eligible to be spent for by the CARES Act. For example, they paid their back taxes. Well, that's not eligible. It's designed to keep your business going, not pay past debts. And so in this unique case, most of them are referred to law enforcement. This was not. We communicated this with law enforcement, but they would not be interested in prosecuting for $20 or $62. So, but they did get with the folks, and the business did pay back the money to the county. So all these others you're going to see were referred to law enforcement, and these cases, they're just not referred, but law enforcement are working these cases. So whether they'll come to fruition or not, they did take these on.
John?
Yes, sir.
It may be in here, and I missed it. Are most of these cases, did they come to your attention through the normal course and scope of your operations, or whistleblowers, or how did these cases wind up on?
All of these cases that I'm talking about today were referred to by the county, by community services, or what's our other office do? Department of,
DHED covers the
Yes.
Restart Business grants.
the Restart Business grants through the county.
And just somebody at the county sees a red flag and,
Yes.
They have a team of reviewers that we've trained at both county agencies, and they help us understand their programs.
okay.
And so when they see a red flag, they let us know. They don't have an investigative staff. We do. If appropriate, we bring law enforcement over.
Okay, and just for the record, I'm going to repeat what you said, so it's on there. The county has a team of reviewers, and if they see red flags, they refer it over to the IG.
Correct.
Great, thank you.
So again, it's a good team effort. This Restart Business grant, again, improperly spent, $25,000. And the person received, I mean, there's all types of reasons we find how they spent this improperly in ways. In this case, they received the $25,000. They had a business that had closed right before CARES Act. Well, they got this money for the business, but they never reopened the business. They didn't spend it on the business. They spent it for other things. So again, this is one that Chelsea Martin did, and we referred this to law enforcement. Another business grant, in this case, they didn't disclose they received the PPP money, and also that the funding was spent improperly. We found it was supported that we did find that they received the federal PPP money, and it was not disclosed, but it wasn't supported, the allegation that the business had enough alternate assets to justify its spending. So we recouped some money, and we referred this. And Cynthia Surreal did. Is Cynthia here? Cynthia's not here. Cynthia did this investigation. She did a number of ours. And now we did also an investigation on, this was a really interesting rental assistant case where a person provided false information. They did receive one loan from the county and then applied for a number of other loans that we find. This person, it was the information that we found, again, it was riddled with inconsistencies, false information. The applicant's employment verifications, pay stub, lease applications contained conflicting addresses, conflicting compensation information, and at times listed her employer in a non-existent city. For example, if you notice let me catch up here on this one. If you notice the picture that I sent, this picture is on the outskirts, this is in the Atlanta area, of a golf course that went out of business. This is the address that she provided one of her, that was where her biotech company was located, that she lost her job. So those are what we found there. Now I'm going to turn this over to Stu. This is a really good investigation case that we did. We found a company that was, again, providing these improper receipts, doubling money for receipts. And Stu took this investigation over when we had an investigator that had left our office that did a great job, was almost to the finish line. Stu took it over and brought it to the finish line and completed the report. So I'll let Stu talk about this.
Thank you, General. And Stu, just for the record, state your full name and your position with the OIG.
Stuart Robinson, Director of Investigations for the Office of Inspector General. Good afternoon. Commercial Cooling was one of the primary air conditioning services vendors for the county. And our investigative period was from mid-2013 through approximately mid-2019. They were a multi-million-dollar services vendor. If a county building's air conditioning broke, they were supposed to come out for an hourly rate and repair it. And they were also supposed to be reimbursed for the actual cost of materials that they used in that repair. They made their profit off their hourly rate, and then they were supposed to turn in original supplier manufacturer invoices for the parts they used. So they got paid the hourly rate, they get reimbursed for the original cost, the original supplier's cost of the parts. Concurrent with their county contract starting, they created a shell company. And they named the shell company HVAC OEM, denoting that it was an original equipment manufacturer. This company, the same service provider created as a purported parts supplier, had no independent business, was entirely funded by the county contractor, and per an interview that we did of the head of this company, had no business purpose. That was an admission in the interview with us. This company that was supposed to have been supplying the original parts was not a parts supplier. We put together the money trail, and if we could click to the next slide. Oh, I've got it here, I'm sorry. So the big number here, and we talked about question costs already, is we found over $1 million of invoices that they submitted to the county from this shell company. Now, the question cost, the identified potential fraud cost was $69,000 because on 69,000 plus of those invoices, we could directly match the part number from the shell company to a legitimate company that they had previously bought it from. So the question cost in this case is a receipt from a company that had no business purpose, but we couldn't track that back to the original cost of the product. This $69,000 represents deliberate markups from them. So on Tuesday, they would buy a part from a legitimate supplier through the vendor, the county vendor name, and later that week, they would create an invoice from the shell company with a markup and submit that for reimbursement.
Is the county still doing business with this contractor or any of its principals?
It's a great question. So the last part of the slide here that I'll focus on is when our final report came out, there was law enforcement involvement, both state and federal. But when our final report came out and the law enforcement involvement was finished, the county terminated the current contract with Commercial Cooling and put them on a 2-year suspension from bidding or entering into any new county contracts. I'll leave that to the county attorney's office, to how they make that effective. Yeah. So, and it's also important to know the county did their job appropriately with this company because they were supposed to get invoices from an original supplier. And the county eventually, we had a whistleblower that tipped us off that whistleblower believed that the invoices the county was appropriately getting, the company was trying to pull one over on the county. So we worked with the county, they provided us the entirety of the invoices, we analyzed them, and we put the investigation together. Thank you.
Thank you, Stu. And again, a great job on the whole team that was involved in this. And it was a very extensive trying to match up all of these invoices. And again, we could just match up 69,000. Much more, you can see the question, this is a good illustration of what, back to my definition of question cost. One, it's a question cost because, again, it didn't have the right documentation. We don't know. I have, it would be just pure speculation to say how much more may have been marked up. I don't know because I don't have the proper documentation, the actual real invoice that they had to match it up. What we did, we can say for sure, identified costs are those that are matched. What else, we don't know because we don't have those other original documents.
But General, if somebody doesn't provide the proper documentation, it shouldn't be reimbursed, right?
Well, that's tough. If the county knew at the time it wasn't proper, if the county would have known that's not the proper, they should not have paid him. The county was they were given bills that looked completely
Right.
original. They were given information that the
No, I'm not calling the county to task. What I'm saying is, earlier in a different scenario, you said when you go in and audit somebody, like, for example, they just tell somebody I had $500 hotel room, that's not supposed to be reimbursed.
Correct.
Or if it is reimbursed, it should be either documented or paid back.
Correct.
So if they didn't ultimately provide the original invoices that will allow you to tell whether there was a markup or not, should we be going after all of those where they didn't provide? Or is a statute of limitations run, or is there some other issue?
I think then you get into the civil matters of is it going to court? Yeah, I think that then you start balancing what it would take going to court.
Cost effectiveness.
Yeah,
Understood.
It's much easier to go to court for that $69,000 that we know, that we can match up exactly. The rest, again, some of them were legit. I mean, they were legitimate parts they were receiving. It was the markup.
It was just the markup. Yeah, they
Markup, so that
were
to
doing
try
the
to-
work. They were just
And
overcharging.
yes, and so you don't know how much of the markup there was on anything
I
else,
guess
if
what I'm
any.
saying is 69, even if they pay back 69, they could have made 10% on $1 million or 20% on $1 million,
Could have.
and they still could come out ahead of the game.
That's why they were also suspended.
Okay, fair enough.
Now for contract oversight, moving into Tony Montero's division and lane of work. This is a snapshot of what he's done over the last 6 months compared to the first. He's got 3 reports right now in draft that should be out within the next month or two. Now, I'm going to turn this over to Tony to talk about. This is a review that we did on PACE, the PACE program, and I'm sure you may have seen this in the news quite a bit. We had some folks come over us to speak about some concerns they had on the program, and we looked at, okay, there's a lot of things that the county commission is looking at, different things about just generally statewide the concept of the program, but we said, no, we're going to look at how the county is managing the program within the confines of the county ordinance on the PACE program. And Tony did that, and I'll turn it over to you, Tony.
And again, Tony, just a reminder, state your full name and your role.
Good afternoon, Tony Montero, Director of Contract Oversight and Evaluations for the IG's office. Good afternoon. I want to talk to you about PACE. The whole thing started because the tax collector's office approached the IG's office, and they had a report that they were preparing on some work that they had done on PACE. PACE is the Property Assessed Clean Energy Program. It's a federal program that was authorized by the state of Florida and in turn authorized by the Board of County Commissioners. It allows homeowners to make energy efficient improvements to their house or businesses, and the cost of that is added to their tax bill. So every year their tax bill will pay a portion of that loan back, and it's different than trying to get a regular loan or a home improvement loan. So they had to create special districts, taxing districts in Palm Beach County. They're pretty much common for the state of Florida. If you do authorize a PACE program, they work with providers who do the money, make the loans, get the subcontractors out there, and actually will do things like install solar panels, hurricane-resistant windows, energy-efficient appliances, and that's how that program works. So we realized after meeting with the tax collector that there's a lot of issues on this. The Office of Resilience was briefing the Board of County Commissioners. There were some articles in the newspaper. So we decided to do a program review. We looked at the ordinance, we looked at the county organization that was managing the program, and we identified over 50 areas in the ordinance that we wanted to verify were these things being done. And we did an extensive review. We found out that there were a few instances where, actually two, where ineligible owners received funding that shouldn't have received it. But overall, the providers, the district, and the Office of Resilience, everyone was in compliance, and OOR, the Resilience Office, was managing the program appropriately. We did make one recommendation, and that was on internal controls. The ordinance had been issued, but we really didn't see where they took that ordinance and turned it into their procedures on how they were going to manage that program. And it's a very small oversight role that they have, but it would assist them in preventing any future problems if they could document and formalize some of those procedures. Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Tony does a great job in his office, both him and Tiffany Thomas, who works for him. Well, Tiffany is not here today. They do, again, in going back to that slide at the start about that spectrum of IG work, Tony and his team work on a lot of this stuff that's the monitoring, the quick looks, the behind-the-scene things that often don't result in a formal report. So he's doing a lot of that, him and Tiffany's doing that, for example. I mean, they go to procurement meetings. They sit down on the whole procurement process, the contract meetings, to see how they're doing, to provide any advice to make sure that they're going, the whole process is going wrong. So here just shows the perspective of some of the things they're looking at. Now, I'm going to talk about, again, we talked about Tony and why he went to that investigator course, because, again, a lot of things they get are inquiries, investigative in nature, but they often don't turn into a formal report. They may, if it becomes significant and there's a finding and we find there are some problems there. But often if they're found that, no, it's not substantiated, this complaint was not substantiated, they often don't result in a formal report that goes out. I'm going to turn this again over to Tony. This is an interesting one, another one that was in the news, that I'm putting him on the hot seat to talk about this one.
Again, Tony Montero, Director of Contract Oversight and Evaluations Division. This was a complaint that came in, a very extensive, comprehensive complaint. It spanned 2 bids, 3 protests, and a special master's hearing, and over a year and a half, almost 2 years worth of time. And that was the protest, or the complaint itself was amended twice. A lot of documentation, very complex. This was on renovating the firehouses. And this was for the construction manager to kind of oversee. They already had designers who were going through all the firehouses in the county and determining what work needed to be done. This was for the construction end of it, where these people were going to manage those construction projects. So the complaint was very complex. They had a lot of things. The staff exceeded their authority in canceling and rebidding it. They had a public official, they claimed, interfered with the award process. A meeting was held in violation of the cone of silence, and a lack of public transparency in the evaluation of proposals. So it was very extensive in going through all the events that happened, determining what happened, setting out timelines, looking at the rules that govern this. And a lot of the information was more of opinion than anything else. Like, for example, the public official did have a meeting, but public officials are allowed to meet with the staff, and there was no discussion that was done behind the scenes or any attempt to influence. Did someone exceed their authority? Well, when you look at where the authority comes from in code down to the county administrator, you realize everybody did the job they were supposed to do. So the cone of silence violation, it happened at a time when the cone of silence wasn't in effect. So there were a lot of things that we addressed and that we looked at. And in the end, we found that the finding wasn't supported. It was complicated because there were 3 vendors and 2 awards were going to be made. So the selection committee had recommended 2 vendors for award. There were the protests, and the purchasing director changed that decision and changed one of the vendors. Then the special master upheld that decision, and in the end, the Board of County Commissioners said, no, you guys have messed this all up, and they went back to the original award that the selection committee had made. So it was a very, very complicated award process. Questions? Yes, they did comply with all the standards and the rules, and they did exactly what their authority allowed them to do and the process that they had specified that they were going to do it at. It came down to a couple of points. Seriously, on such a major project, maybe $5 million in construction manager fees over a couple of years. So you're looking at maybe $50 million worth of construction projects. And it came down to just a couple of points. I think it was in the local preference category, whether someone actually had a business operation in the county or not. And when you read that, and it was up to the board to interpret that, but when you read what the rules say, there is some room for interpretation, but you can't come out and say somebody violated something. And the selection committee made a decision, and there was evidence to back it up. So that's why the board said, wait a minute, why are you changing meanings halfway through? And it got very complicated, but it came down to like 2 points, 3 points between the 2 vendors.
Were there any recommendations so that for the future when the county is doing these types of contracts?
No, we didn't make any recommendations. We just responded to the complaint. There are, you can make recommendations in a situation like that, more along the lines of internal controls. But in this situation, everybody really complied with what they were supposed to do. It just got down to the human element, the interpretation of what was written down. And I think that's maybe where it got confusing. But if you look straight at the rules, the procedures, and what was written, and all the standards, and that's what we do. We just look at the standards and try and find the truth of the matter. And when we looked at the standards, no one had violated anything, so there was no findings or recommendations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks again, Tony. And that's why, we need somebody like Tony in the office. He is a procurement expert going all the way back years. He's a Air Force Academy grad, went in the Air Force, was a pilot, and then got into procurement in the Air Force for years. He's worked in procurement for years before this at FAU. He's been a consultant in this area. These are technical matters that you have to have a very expert technical person, and so we're just so fortunate to have Tony running the shop. And while I'm saying that, my Air Force veteran, and Jeff, another Air Force veteran, coming up for Veterans Day, so thank you for your service. So that's, and again, these investigations type in or what Tony looked at. We had a complaint on Palmtran that some of the practices, one came in that the practices were for professional services contract were unethical, invalid, and the misuse of public funds. The complainant had questioned the need for outside contractors and the relationship with the people with inside Palmtran, their relationship with the vendors. Again, Tony looked at this in detail and found that that was not substantiated. Again, a number of these, just like the one that Tony talked about, on the surface sometimes, I can understand why people complain. They look on the surface, a lot of times there are people that have a lot of questions, that this, sometimes it just doesn't look right, and that's what we do. IGs then will take a look at the matter, and go to find the truth. We measure the actions according to the standards and find out, was it right or not? So when people come to us, again, oftentimes they're not as happy that we don't find, sometimes it's substantiated, but we're going to find the truth. That's what we're going to get down to. The bottom line, was it a violation of the standards or not? This next one was Riviera Beach. Again, this is one that I can understand somebody would complain about because the city council, the allegation was that they exceeded their authority by passing a resolution to approve a contractor's site plan at the Port of Palm Beach in exchange for a funds donation and to be excused from the landscaping requirements of their own land development code. So on the surface, it looks like there's something not right about this. Well, again, Tony looks into this, and we find that in this particular case, putting a landscaping project at this location was really just not practical. It just would not work. And so in the negotiations between the city, the port, the contractor said, all right, it's usually called to put something there. How about if I give the city money to a cash donation that what it would cost me to do the landscaping here, that they can do some improvement someplace else in the city. Now, they still would say, is this a violation? Well, there was a precedent we found within the city that this had been done, so this had been done before. And so what we suggested is that we did not find it supported, but we suggested that the city update their code to recognize that, hey, there's exception to this. There's times and places, and it's happened in the past, that there could be exceptions to this, and memorialize it in their references for future cases. Now, this is an interesting one that Tiffany Thomas did under Tony's evaluation. Now, you will read occasionally across the nation, this is unfortunately happens from time to time, that it's product substitution, basically, what you'll find. Somebody puts a bid to cities, to the government, that, hey, I will put, so many hundreds of trees out in the median, we'll put trees out and about, and they receive the bid. Well, they make the bid for trees this size, but they go purchase trees this size, which is a lot cheaper. And they'll skim, and that's where they're going to make their money. So this is, unfortunately, we'll read about this from time to time. So we checked out a contract like this in Boca Raton. And good news is we found that we had Tiffany went around to 11 sites, and she looked at 363 plants and trees, and she measured them. And she, saw that they were the proper site. So good. The city was getting their money's worth out of that contract.
Did this investigation result from a complaint, or was this simply
This was
a
self-initiated.
normal? Okay.
And we do these on occasion from, again, just risks that we do, risk assessments a lot of times through what we see in the county, what we've seen nationally. I go to these, conferences every year, and we're in touch with the national IGs, and usually when I see, oh, wait a minute, this has popped up a number of times, let's look at an area that we may at least do a spot check to see how are we doing down here in Palm Beach County. So that was self-initiated.
So I guess it can be said that in order to get their jobs done thoroughly, your staff are willing to go out on a limb.
Yes,
Really?
that's good. Tony also has 2 open reviews that are COVID-related right now, all going. One of them is he's tracking all of this funds as they're coming in and going out. He's tracking the big picture of where funds are coming into the county and when they're being expended. And number 2, he's also doing a survey, countywide survey of premium pay supplements. When this first came out, there was a number of cities. It all depends. City to city, we use this money very differently. In some cities, there was no premium pay that was given out. In other cities, some people, like the county, people who had to work when everybody else went home, they were given some compensation time. So if you weren't here, other cities gave everybody money. Some cities gave people money to even people who went home. gave them money. So it's a wide spectrum of how this money was spent. And so one, we want to just get a handle on how was this money spent, particularly in premium pay that we gave, and what was it kept in compliance with the law and the regulations, number one, and even if it wasn't, just for some lesson learned of how different folks spent this money. Okay, now we're getting to audits. And this is a snapshot of our audits over the past 6 months compared to the previous 6 months. And if you notice, there's only one report. There's about 3 or 4 that should be coming out within the next month or so. And 3 of those reports would have been out, but again, we tried to work with 3 of those were from working with the cities, and they've just had it's taken some time to get the adequate documentation from the cities, that they've been shorthanded with COVID, a lot of things going on, and so we've been working with them. But it's kind of slowed up our process of reports. The dollar amount down there, in this case, we combined question cost and the potential cost savings. And I could have broken that just for a breakout. Most of those dollars that you will see for both periods of time was question cost. So the bulk of that, over $400,000 was question cost out of here. So this will be important later on when we roll up our information for the entire year. So the bulk of that was question cost. Now, we did a audit of Palm Beach County Fire Rescue, their payroll. It was extensive. Payroll, I talked to Commissioner Crydell, and he's been involved in some of this in his business, but payroll on police and fire is across the country is very complex. They have a number of different systems that they do their payroll, they do their accounting for time, very complex. It took some time. Kathy Davis was Kathy there, she really worked on this hard, and she was supported by Jennifer. I don't know if Jennifer's here, and it was a complex audit, but I'm going to let Hillary talk about this. So Hillary, our Director of Audit, is going to discuss this.
And I know I sound like a broken record, but if I can have your full name and your job description, please.
I'm Hillary Beaujean. I'm the Director of Audit for the IG's office. So as John mentioned, this audit was very complex. Fire Rescue has multiple bargaining unit agreements. Those bargaining unit agreements all have different types of pay, some over 30 different types of pay. And in addition, there were different systems used for scheduling, timekeeping, and payroll. This audit was initiated based on a complaint. And the first finding that you'll see here was identified based on an allegation from that complaint. The allegation was that an employee was overpaid using county funds while working for the union. Now, we found that the allegation was supported, and we verified that the employee paid back the county and that the amount that they were overpaid, and that they also did an adjustment to make the county whole and correct the union time pool, which should have funded the pay originally. This finding occurred because an employee's schedule was changed to include union work. However, the change was not executed properly in their scheduling system. And in addition, the Fire Rescue's payroll was not notified of the schedule change. And so this error went unnoticed for a year. When the error was caught, they made the corrections, and in our audit, we recommended that Fire Rescue ensure that payroll is always notified of these schedule changes to ensure that they're executed properly in the system, and so that error doesn't occur going forward. The second finding listed here was that a sick leave payout to a separated employee was not calculated according to county policy, and it resulted in an overpayment of almost $16,000. This was considered an identified cost because Fire Rescue can recoup that amount if they choose to. We recommended that Fire Rescue recoup the overpayment, and also that they implement a review and oversight process to ensure that those leave payouts are calculated correctly in the future. The third and fourth findings listed on the slide, we found over 100 overtime hours and over 800 leave hours were not properly approved in the timekeeping system. This resulted in question costs of over $70,000 due to policy violations. We recommended that Fire Rescue follow their policies and then also properly approve those pay requests in the future. And then lastly, we found that 2 former employees had access to the timekeeping and scheduling systems after their separation from Fire Rescue. This violated county's IT policy and increased the risk of unauthorized access and entries in their systems. We recommended that Fire Rescue implement a process to ensure that that employees' access is removed upon separation in order to comply with the IT policy and also to reduce that risk of unauthorized access. Thank you.
Thank you, Hillary. And again, another great catch we have that run our audit division. Again, she's got a great experience doing a great job leading and has, she's also, with all the certifications, she's a CPA and has a laundry list of certifications of expertise behind her. Okay, we just had that one audit, but we put out, I think this is significant, the audit department, Hank Nagel was the main author of this, put out a tips and trends, and these are to help educate folks ahead of time, part of that foresight role to help and assist the county and the cities, one, be compliant and stave off any problems. Put out a tips and trends on a new Florida law that came out in July on cybersecurity. Before I get into this, did you know that in 2021, there were over 2,000 ransomware attacks on the public sector at local government, schools, and healthcare providers? And they generally, of these 2,000 attacks they found, the majority of those attacks were against small counties and small cities. And so this is part of this law to help focus on some of the municipalities. They already have the state already has some good checks and balances in place, and I work closely with the state chief inspector general up there. But they're trying to, again, get this down to the cities and the counties. Because again, cyber attacks, as we know, if you experience a ransomware, which a number of cities within Palm Beach County has experienced that over the years, a loss of sensitive personal and financial information, disruption of services, significant financial loss, and reputational loss of public trust. So it's critical that we get on top of this. And so we put this, again, this tips and trends out to kind of let folks know here what are the laws. Some of the highlights of it is there has to be training now for new employees and employees who are particularly have access to information required by the state. Adopt cybersecurity standards to safeguard our data. Notify the state. Before there wasn't a requirement for any county, local county or city to notify the state. Now they have to notify the state if there has been attack or ransomware incident has happened. And also cease making ransomware payments or otherwise complying with the ransom demands.
Just for the record, the chair is excusing Commissioner Sharif so she can be in court. Thank you.
So we not only put this out for information, but we gave notice also to the cities that we're beginning, and you'll see later on, we're doing now cyber audits and reviews. So we're doing some basic cyber audits and reviews on some of these basic things. Again, I was just on the phone today and yesterday with the state chief inspector. They've got initiatives at the state level to beef up theirs, and so she was happy to work with us and wants to work alongside us and share some of the things they're doing and the training that they're receiving for some of their auditors. And so she was happy to find out that we're aggressively working to do IT audits. They're going to be working with us. Okay, training and outreach. Here's just a snapshot of some of the folks I've talked to inside the county government, outside of the county government. Not here just, I did things like just this last weekend, I went down to FAU at their executive MBA program and spoke for a couple hours on ethics and leadership in organizations down there at their executive MBA program. Those are the types of things that we do. Again, I mentioned before, Stu and Tony went out to the League of Cities and gave some a presentation, some training out there. We mentioned before, Stu went out to community service, and we're working with them. The IG Institute, we talked about that. And again, you know, I think that I'm the chair of this, our National IG Institute, and the chair of our professional certification board. So I'm the one that coordinate and bring in the instructors for we have 4 classes, an IG class, auditor, investigator, and inspection/evaluator course. So we bring in folks from around the country to train hundreds of people, IGs, from the federal to the local level. Okay, now we're going to shift gears and start to wind down. From the 6-month, and this is just since it's the end of the year, you're going to be seeing some of this in our annual report. This is just kind of a summary, a snapshot. When you take the last 2 6 months together, you'll be seeing this again in our annual report. And that question cost, again, that comes from the question cost on page 20 from the investigations and page 40 from the auditors, what they found, that $400,000. So that's just a snapshot of we've been busy over the last year. Budget and staffing. Again, this is just to give a snapshot of our budget. Our budgets were about $3.5 million is our annual budget to make us work. That is around 0.04% of the budgets of all of the agencies that we oversee, the county, the 39 municipalities and solid waste authority. So that's a fraction of our budget is for the incidents we oversee. Now, originally I sent out to you, if you happen to look at the first PowerPoint that I sent out before I made this today, I had $3.5 million. To put that in perspective, originally it was approximately $5.50, and I said per taxpayer. And Commissioner Crydell called me up and asked me, what do you mean by taxpayer? And I used the taxpayer term is a term that the clerk of court and comptroller uses. The way he defines taxpayer and his predecessor is a taxable parcel. And a taxable parcel is property which the property appraiser has assigned a distinct ad valorem property tax ID number. It's bureaucratic, but what that means is my house is so really there's 2 citizens in that house. And so we thought after talking to Commissioner Crydell, I thought a better way to represent that, instead of $5.50 per taxpayer, because there's more taxpayers in the house, is let's look at citizens instead of taxpayer. And there's about 1.48 citizens. So for the citizens of Palm Beach County, what we cost is about $2.30. So I ate half of that hamburger there. So it's half a hamburger about what we cost, instead of the full hamburger, which was in the original slide. And that doesn't even include all the folks who come through the city, all the tourists. You imagine if you consider that in, we'd probably be something like a chicken McNugget or something like that.
I think there's more expensive.
Okay. This is just the size of our office. We rate 27 people. Back in 2010, we were originally authorized 40, seeing the expanse of what we had to provide oversight to, and we never been there. But again, I'm not complaining. We're fully engaged. We've got plenty of work to do and plenty of work in the hopper. And it's been tough even at this level of 27. And I've talked to a number of the county administrator and a number of folks in the cities. It's been tough over the COVID time to hire folks to fill positions that we do have. And that's across the board in government. Where are we going? we're going to finish out, this is our audit plan. These are audits that we have in progress that we're going to be finishing out through this coming year. So these are some of the audits that we have right now in process. And there's some more audits. And you can see we're doing 3 IT audits and reviews right now. We're almost ready to put out the Highland Beach results of that audit. And so that's where we're going with those. Then again, looking ahead, things we're going to do, you're going to see within the next month, you'll be seeing our annual report that comes out, and that's our cover. We've got just a draft right now. We're working on that, but that's what it'll be. At least that's what the cover looks like, you'll see. Execute the audit plan and increase outreach. That's still a constant goal that we're working on. How do we get out and increase our outreach? And we're going to be more strategizing about how we do that and working on, particularly now that COVID is, we think, coming to somewhat of an abeyance. And we're reviewing our strategic plan. It's come up, we have a strategic plan, it's come up to the end. We're reviewing that and going to be doing a new plan. Evangeline Rentz is going to be leading that for our office, and it's going to be, again, a bottom-up review. I want it to start out that she's going to be working with folks down at the working level to try to get everybody's thoughts and input and work it up for our plan about where we're going to go through 2027. That concludes my presentation. Are there any other questions or comments?
Thank you, General Carey. Any questions from the commission?
No.
Okay. Thank you very much, General Carey. We appreciate that.
Thank you for your support.
And I don't think it can be overstated that the primary mission of your office and of the COE is to help people avoid wrongdoing, not to catch and punish them after they do wrongdoing. That's the secondary mission, but we want people to do the right thing to begin with. Okay, I don't see any public comment cards. Is there anybody that got missed that wishes to speak? All right, and a motion to adjourn is in order
Motion.
by
Second.
everybody. We're adjourned. Thank you very much.